2023 Islandora conference with our then intern Rebecca Power. So I made a few updates since then. My outcomes for this presentation is to help folks become familiar with the Islandora Foundation, our resources, and our community, to become aware of the onboarding checklist and what to sign up for, and learn how and where to participate in the community. The rough agenda is, first I'm going to talk about the various structures of our community and foundation, and then I'm going to go over several resources that I think are useful for those that are brand new or even existing members of our community. So the Islandora software has many parts. Our community has many parts. And if you're brand new, that can be confusing. It can be confusing if you've been here for a while. And I definitely learned new things by just putting together this presentation. So I'm going to start talking about a very formal part of our community, which is the Islandora Foundation. The foundation is a nonprofit organization. It is federally registered in Canada. It has a set of bylaws that it follows, and it's financially supported by donations. Yearly donations are grouped into levels, and you need to meet a minimum level to be considered an official member of the foundation. Now, on the other hand, to be a member of the community, we don't have a strict definition of that, only for being a member of the foundation. And the first part of the foundation I'm going to talk about is the board of directors, which is made up of 4 officers, which are listed on the slide right now. And to keep it simple, the board has various responsibilities, and they include legal and financial responsibilities for the foundation. Now, other part of the foundation is the leadership group. And this is an older graphic I had seen previously in other presentations to show you the different groups that interact that are in the community versus in the foundations. So I've seen the leadership group of the foundation described as a strategic arm of the foundation. And in turn, the leadership group supports all these other outside groups within our community. And I will slowly go over every single circle in this diagram, which is not drawn to scale. So here are the 2 first circles I'll talk about. There's the Islandora Coordinating Committee. As you can imagine, there's a lot of coordinating done at this committee, like organizing events like today, but there's a lot of support done by this group of the other interest groups that the committee has. Now, this other group that I want to mention is called TAG, the Technical Advisory Group. I'm so thankful that the TAG group hosts or chairs the weekly open tech calls. And a very key responsibility is the TAG folks advise on future software directions based on their technical expertise. Now, like any mature and well-established open source group, this Islandora community has a code of conduct, and any text in my presentation that's underlined, that is an URL link that leads you to that resource. So here's a link if you wanted to read our full code of conduct that we try to follow in our communications, in our events, like this event that we're in right now. Here I'm listing 3 ways that you can reach out to the Code of Conduct Committee if you want to report an incident or if you want to ask a question. And I'm also listing the current members of this committee. The next group is a newish group to our community, is the Ambassadors Group, which is a group of individuals who have made themselves available to help and support others in the community. Now, one way to spot them, and they are listed on this slide, but if you happen to be on Slack, their names in Slack will, right next to them will have this icon, which is a black circle with a green A to represent the Ambassadors Group. Now, a very typical group within any open source community is code committers. They are usually independent contractors, or they could be someone like me. I am a committer who happens to be an employee of a library that uses Islandora, and other committers happen to be employees of vendors that provide commercial services to users of Islandora. As you can imagine, code committers write code and ends up in the Islandora software, but sometimes they'll just help out in verifying or testing code submissions from non-committers to see if they warrant or they can pass muster to be added to our code. And before I was a committer, I was always grateful for code committers that would, when they had the bandwidth, they would try to give tech support or advice to those in the committee. And I definitely benefited from their help in the past. Now, I'm going to start going through 9 separate resources that are extremely helpful for new and existing members of the community. But I have 2 slides where I just list them one by one. So there's the first slide, here's the second, and now we'll slowly go over all of the resources. Now, the most basic one is our community homepage, which is islandora.ca, a very simple URL. If you remember only one URL from my whole presentation, just remember this one because it serves as a gateway to pretty much every single resource I'm going to mention in the rest of the presentation. Of course, this is a site that talks about the very basics of the features of Islandora, and will list some of the members of a couple of committees. So the site is islandora.ca. And one additional site and resource that you can reach from our community homepage is the Islandora official documentation. Here are 2 screenshots of what that site looks like. So you can imagine it has information on how to use Islandora, it has information on how to configure Islandora, and has information, let's say, on how to install Islandora. The content of this site has come from volunteers that donated their time and then donated their content. And there is an Islandora documentation interest group that maintains and manages the work done for this site. Now, another great resource is Community Wiki, which happens to be hosted through GitHub. You'll find lots of details about our various committees and interest groups. You can read information about past events or upcoming events. And for example, you can read more information about the various membership levels to the foundation. Here's a couple of screenshots of what that site looks like. And again, any text that's underlined, that usually means it'll lead you to that resource. Now, I'm going to go over these various interest groups and a couple of meetings that I consider them great resources. These groups are focused on various topics. And if any of the topics they cover interest you, you are always welcome to drop into their meetings that are usually held online using Zoom. And they typically, all of these groups meet once a month. The first one is one I happen to be a convener of that group, is the documentation interest group. We happen to meet the second Wednesday of a month. Now, the metadata interest group, I believe they meet on Mondays once a month. The IRIG, or the Institutional Repositories group, I don't know what time of the month they meet. And then finally, one of our newest groups is Liberal Arts and Glam group, which I've tried to attend because it's one of the topics I'm interested in. Now, when we talk about meetings, we have the weekly open tech call, which the tagged group chairs will review issues or essentially bugs from the software or talk about new features. And this one happens weekly. It happens at 1 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday. And of course, we have the open community meeting, which is what we're attending right now. Now, I talked a lot about monthly meetings and weekly meetings and when they happen. It's very hard to keep track of, but thankfully, another great resource that we have in this community is the community calendar. The community calendar can be found from islandora.ca, and you can visit this page so you can give yourself a quick reminder of when meetings or events are upcoming. Now, you can take it a step further, and because this is a Google-based calendar, you can integrate it to your personal or your work calendar. So as you see your week laid out, you can see what Islandora community meetings are happening. And that helps me not miss the meetings I like to attend. Another great resource is our Google-based mailing list. This is an active list, but it's not very high traffic. It is moderated, so you never see spam. And there's lots of great announcements and updates geared towards the community. And sometimes people ask for help, and they'll get help right from the this mailing list. Maybe a more discreet way to reach out to the community is this address called community@islandora.ca. You can alternatively use that. I also like visiting the Google site for our mailing list because you can do searches on past messages. And if you sign up for a digest of this list, quick trick that I like to use, if I just want to answer to one particular message from my digest, I can go to this website and only reply to that particular message instead of having to deal with the digest and deleting all the extra content. Again, that underlying text would lead you straight to this Google site for our mailing list. Another great resource, and maybe I'm biased, but I think I like all of these 9 resources I'm covering, is a YouTube channel. And when I checked last week, there were 147 videos. They include like longer videos, like whole conference sessions from past conferences. There's going to be copies of open meeting presentations, and this presentation I'm giving right now should end up in the YouTube channel at some point. And there's many tutorials. Some of them are just 3-minute longs, just like little morsel, and then you have like half an hour or hour-long tutorials. I highly recommend this resource, and again, it can be reached from the islandora.ca main site. Now I'm going to take a break to briefly talk about ways to participate. The assumption is with an open source group that the only way to participate is to be technical, and that is not true. There are many non-technical ways to participate and contribute. But I think one of the simplest ways to participate, especially if you're brand new, is just keep up with our announcements so you know what changes are happening or are incoming. Because I feel like an informed group works better. And just, let's say, signing up to the mailing list will be a simple way to keep up to date. Now, as you get involved with more of our collaboration and communication tools, you'll be surprised. There might be questions that someone will ask that you may be able to provide an answer, even if you're just giving feedback. Sometimes a developer just is desperate to get feedback on something. Now, another non-technical way to participate in our community is to help with facilitating meetings and events or to help organize them. So these are things that you can do without having to have any technical expertise. Now, another more typical way to contribute to an open source community is to report issues and or bugs in the code or even the documentation. That's another great way to participate. Now, there's situations where programmers are suggesting a future change, or they have a change that they built that we want some feedback. If you hear about those changes, please provide us feedback. And of course, if you're technically minded, you're a programmer, yes, we welcome code changes, but we also welcome changes to our documentation. And if our documentation happens to be written in English, if you speak English, have some basic knowledge of our software, maybe right now or in the near future, please come in and join us in the documentation group and add some new documentation when the time is right for you. Now I'm going to skip the recap slide and switch to a dedicated presentation I have on just how to use Slack, because I've got 2 more resources to talk about: Slack and GitHub. Let me share again. For those of you that may not know much about Slack, it's an instant messaging platform that is similar to the older IRC. There are 3 key features I always like to talk about. Is it has channels, which are similar to individual chat rooms. With Slack, you can search previous messages and you can have direct messaging. Now, I want to say that when you're asking for help of the community, it's strongly encouraged that you send in your technical request for help through Slack instead of an email. It just can be faster to get your problem solved than you send an email. You can still send an email to the mailing list, just a general suggestion from the community. Now, this seems weird if you haven't used Slack, but to join our formal Islandora Slack workspace, you have to go through the invitation process, which is using this link. I'll stay here for a few seconds and I'll paste it at the end. If you follow this link, you'll be able to go through the process of doing the invitation. And if you want to check this out later, no surprise, from our main website, islandora.ca, in 2 separate locations, you can find a link for this invitation URL. And when you go through that process, you will create a new account tied to that workspace. You have to use a valid email address and a password. But half the time, as long as you remember whatever email address you use, it'll be easy to get back in. Once you've gone through the invitation, this URL for our Islandora workspace is very simple. It's islandora.slack.com. And this is roughly what the interface looks like. On the left-hand side, there's some navigation and filtering choices. And on the right-hand side is the main content pane. And usually on the left, you have a choice to see what channels you have access to. And right now, when you have a brand new Islandora Slack account, you'll have 4 default channels that you're subscribed to. The first one is Islandora channel, which is our equivalent of a general channel where people just talk about or ask questions about Islandora. You also automatically get calendar entries from our community calendar if there's going to be a meeting that day. The mailing list channel is a more custom channel that we have that's automatically set that you'll get a copy of any email sent to our mailing list. So just at a quick convenience of another way you can see what is coming into the mailing list. Now there's a support channel. Surprise, surprise, you can ask for support help in that channel. And you'll often get lots of help there, but remember, someone that will be best qualified to give you help may work at different time zone than you do. So it could take a while to get a reply. And we also have a water cooler channel where we can talk about the weather, talk about memes, as very informal discussions in that channel. And those are the 4 that are found by default when you get your brand new account. Now, if you're ready to post something or reply to something to a channel, you first select it on the left. And in this lower bar that I highlighted in red is where you write your message. And here's what it looks like when you start. But after you're done typing, the button on the right will turn green and you can send the message. Now, there's more than these 4 default channels that you can subscribe to. And when I checked last year, there were 38 public channels. They covered various topics. So I'm going to give you an example of the channels I happen to subscribe to because they align with my topics. One is there's a dedicated documentation channel that is used by the documentation interest group, which I'm a part of. I installed my server in the ISLE style, so I subscribe to the ISLE channel. I like to use the Islandora Workbench tool, and I've contributed to it. So there's a great channel dedicated to talk about Islandora Workbench. I highly recommend it. And every year, a new channel is created when we have the yearly conference. So it's a great channel to subscribe to, especially if you're on site for the conference. Now, in the past, Slack had this great link on the left that said all channels, so you can browse the existing channels, but Slack changed their interface. So you have to click on the left-hand side where there's a 3 dots icon and it says more, and you can navigate towards a new channel section. And if you have your channel section activated, the alternative way is to click on that chevron and it gives you a menu that says manage and then browse channel. So I didn't like the Slack change their interface. So these are 2 ways to navigate all the other channels that we have available. So here's where the all channels view looks like. And there's a search field that, let's say, if you type in documentation, you will get like 5 results. And in the results view, there's a link to quickly view the channel or to join it permanently. So it will show up on the left-hand side. Now, searching Slack can be very helpful. It can help you to do what I call self-text support, because I'll often have an issue with Islandora, and I'll just paste parts of my error message in Slack. And to do the searching, as I highlighted it in the upper hand, there's a search bar that if you click up there, you can put in your search term. So I put in the search term music, and you'll see it highlighted. And one nifty thing is there are facets to your searches in Slack. So you can facet your searches to be messages from only one particular person or for messages that came from one particular channel. Now there's a way to send direct messages between you and another person and you and a couple of people. So only the people you message to will see that message. They're called DMs. And the icon for that is now this grayish square and a pencil. So it's supposed to look like a pen and paper. That's how you start a new message and you type in a to address. In this case, will be the handle of someone's name. And here's, I just start typing my name, it'll autocomplete to my name. And there's some additional features to Slack, but in the interest of time, we can cover in the Q&A if folks have questions. But for now, let me go back to the presentation for the next resource I want to cover, which is GitHub. Now, if you're new to the community, you may not want to rush into using GitHub because it's one brand new thing to learn. But as you get more comfortable, it can be helpful for an opportunity to give feedback back to the community, but also could be a way that you can give yourself some self-tech support. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So to create a free GitHub account, you have to go to github.com. And for those that don't know, GitHub is a platform that lets us store repositories. And we use these repositories to store the Islandora code base and to store the Islandora official documentation. So like I said, to start the process of making an account, a free account, by the way, you go to github.com and you'll need 3 pieces of information. You'll need a valid email address, you need a password, and a unique username. But watch out, there's millions of GitHub users, so it could take a few tries to find a unique username. And every few months, the look of the GitHub site changes, but they'll have a space age theme normally. And in the upper right, on the upper left, there'll be a button that says sign up. And you'll have to click one of those buttons. And the site still has this look, the space age look, where it starts asking you questions, and you need the 3 pieces of information: email, username, and password. And they'll ask you multiple questions, more than you would expect. But a few of them you can just hit no, like you don't have to sign up to the newsletter. They'll have you do a CAPTCHA, and every year they change the CAPTCHA a bit. And at one point they'll send you an email and ask for a code that will show up in your email. And this is what the email looks like, and the code you'll have to put in. And then they'll keep asking questions, and you don't have to become best friends with GitHub by telling them all the info you have, because at the bottom, you'll usually see a choice that says skip personalization. Just go ahead and skip it, and you'll eventually get to a white page like this, and that means you're done. You now have a free GitHub account. So one thing you can do with that GitHub account is add an issue. And in the GitHub world, an issue can be used for bug reports, for feature requests, or to report documentation problems. So now I'm going to go through the example of how do we submit a bug to one of our Islandora repositories. So this is a typical look of the homepage of a GitHub repository, and there's usually a link in the upper left that says issues. So when you go to that page, congratulations, you are now in what we call the issues queue. And if you're about to put in a new issue because you're having a problem, the best practice is to search if somebody else has had that issue before, so we don't create duplication. So I created a cheesy example. I wanted to put in an issue about puppies, so I ran a search for the word puppies, and when I saw there was no hits on that, I felt I had the green light to proceed to create an issue. And there's a button on the right-hand side to start that process. So when you click the new issue button, in this community, we have templates to guide you in creating an issue, and we have 4. And you'll pick the template that best fits the situation you're in. And for this example, I picked the bug report template. Because I use the bug report template in the field that is used for the title of the issue, it already has the prefix of bug. So you want to keep that there and write a title that summarizes in one sentence what your issue is. And then in the lower half, you'll type in information about your issue. And the template will provide suggestions of how to fill out that information. And the rule of thumb is more is better. Like the more details you provide, like what operating system you have with the issue, what version of Islandora, what style that you use to install Islandora. So the more information with an issue, the better. And that includes screenshots, which can be added. And that's how you submit an issue within GitHub. Now, I briefly wanted to talk about searching for issues, because here's a way that you can give yourself some self-text support. Because there's many times I had an issue with Islandora, and I'll go to the issues. I'll either search from close or open issues to see if someone's had my same error. And when you're inside an existing issue, scroll down and you see comments that other people may have added to your issue or somebody else's issue with workarounds or general tips. So that's a great way that you can do self-service within the community. And with that, I'll end this section on just GitHub.
You're muted, Yamil.
Thank you. So one of the last things I'm going to say is that we're aware there's lots of things you can sign up for. So to keep track of the things you could sign up for if you're new or existing members of the community, here is a screenshot and a link to what we call the onboarding checklist on our wiki that gives you suggestions of things you might want to eventually sign up for as you get more involved. There's also a form that you can fill out, a Google form, where you can submit your contact information and email, and you can have someone from the community do some of the behind the scenes setups, so you can have access to all these various resources I have talked about. Sorry. The last things I want to say is that a few years ago, I joined this community, and I was not surprised that people were very welcoming. And I think it continues to be very welcoming. And please take your time to sign up to some of these various resources I mentioned, even if it's just one or two. And I don't think that welcomeness as a community has not helped, but this is a good time to give a shout out to people that were very welcoming to me many years ago. Quick shout out to Jared, quick shout out to Mark, quick shout out to Rosie, who were very welcoming when I first showed up a few years ago. And I will do them proud by being just as welcoming to any new folks that come in going forward. So at this point, we can switch to general question about this presentation or just the general QA session. And I'll paste the link to the presentation in a few moments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yamil. That was really, really great. And hopefully when we get the recording, I'll stop recording now before the Q&A.